Welcome to the Holistic Ascent podcast, where we dig into specific tools and resources to elevate your health in tangible and applicable ways. My name's Lexie Heron, and I am your host of the podcast today. Before we get started, it's important to note that not every tool or topic explored here will be applicable to everyone, and that's the beauty of bio-individuality and each of us bringing our own unique experiences and circumstances to the table. None of the information in this podcast is medical advice, and I always recommend working with a qualified practitioner to address any specific health concerns. Without further ado, let's dig in. My high speed clocked was 30 miles per hour that day. Dust powdered my cheeks like Earth's natural bronzer. My teeth sparkled with dirt from the smile of checking my adrenaline rush box while downhill mountain biking last week. My form in the berms and on the jumps was more honed in than ever before. My momentum carrying me through the joys of my favorite sport in the mountains was enough to keep me coming back for more. Until I hit the dirt really hard. There was a split second in the air where I processed, I'm going to hit my head really hard right now. Thank God I bought this full face helmet last week. Bam, earth and body collide in a not so graceful way. The sky goes dark for a moment, light comes back just in time to get my bike and self out of the middle of the jump-filled path and to warn my friends to slow down because this lip will take you out. The route was called Sparkle, and we joked once we got to the bottom that we all didn't necessarily shine on the run, but we sure did sparkle. Even if it was deeply ingrained dirt in the crevices of my body that I would still find a week later, dirt sparkles to tell the story. I inspected my helmet for any blatant damage, dusted myself off, and pushed through a migraine to keep riding in a very conservative manner for the day. I didn't think much of my fall, just another crash on my bike that I could luckily walk away from. But the next morning and the mornings of the week to come, I kept waking up with a worsening headache. Head pounding, my shoulder was throbbing, the nerves were pinched. Even my arms and legs started to go in and out of feelings of numbness and tingling. It was a little freaky for sure. 3 days after the accident, I thought I might finally wake up feeling better, but to my surprise, this was the worst day yet. Feeling like I could hardly hold up the weight of my own head, I limped around trying to be a human and found that it was nearly impossible. My pain was a 10 out of 10, the worst I had ever experienced, which is a lot for me. I've been through a lot, from hip surgeries to knee surgeries, and this far exceeded any of that. At least when I had my hip surgery, I could reach for the painkillers they gave me and be able to get some good rest in. Boy, did this accident take a toll on me, both mentally and physically. I reached for my wellness toolkit, and I like to refer to my wellness toolkit often. It's like this accumulation of all of these different tools and experiences that I've had that I can reach for when the time comes. If I have an ache or pain, here's something I can reach for. If I have a headache, here's something I can reach for. If I'm dealing with the flu or an illness, here's something I can reach for. And I just think it's really empowering to have that wellness toolkit. I reach for so many different things, from my pure aspirin to my red light therapy to my castor oil packs on my shoulder and neck, to arnica drops in my water and sipping on that every 15 minutes, to arnica lotion, acupuncture, and cupping. And I even reached for Excedrin because at one point I just needed some relief and I was about to try anything. It seemed like nothing was really working, and maybe it took the edge off just a little so I could function slightly. But it wasn't until I submerged myself in the magnesium-rich float tank that I felt my body truly begin to heal. It was like my muscles were finally saying, thank you for remembering. Float therapy for the win. So sensory deprivation float therapy has been a potent tool in my wellness toolkit for years. Whether I just need an environment for my mind and body to slow down, if I need some meditation time to process through some tough thoughts or emotions, or if I simply just need some muscular relaxation, stimulated by soaking in the gallons of magnesium-rich salts in that float tank. Last week, when I dipped my toes into the float tank, I instantly felt the deep relaxation and calm in my body. Once I was fully in the tank, it was like the magnesium soap was giving my body and my soul a giant comforting hug. Even my heart, which had been a little bit erratic and was kind of freaking me out this week, it started to slow down and I could hear my heartbeat being just nice, steady, and stable. Magnesium, I am so thankful for you. And that's what we're going to dive into in this podcast, the magical wonders of magnesium, how it can help us achieve this deep relaxation state, and how it drives literally every cellular process in our body. As I lay there in that tank in peace, I finally was able to separate from the aches and pains of my sparkle crash. My mind was able to finally find some clarity again for the first time in a week, and my muscles were able to soak up the goodness. And I thought to myself, duh, Lexie, why didn't you reach for magnesium in the first place? What the heck? It was one of those moments where I was so focused on the pain, I forgot to reach for one of the tools that I preach from the rooftops all the time that I know is one of the most potent tools in my wellness toolkit, magnesium. How could I forget about one of the most valuable minerals? So let's dig into a little bit about magnesium and why it's so valuable. For starters, magnesium is the first mineral that our body resorts to in times of stress. Whether it's emotional, physical, environmental, all stress impacts magnesium stores in the body because magnesium is required from anywhere to 300 to 3,000 enzymatic reactions in the body. And now this is a funny thing. I know 300 to 3,000 is like a wide array of numbers, but depending on the research articles you look at and the books you read on magnesium, everyone seems to have a different magic number for how many enzymatic reactions require magnesium in the body. But regardless of the number, we can really gather that magnesium is vital for human life. The necessary reactions that generate energy, healing, and life within us wouldn't be possible without magnesium. It's the 8th most common element in the Earth's crust, comprising the mountains around us and the depths of the sea. Magnesium is a macro mineral that our body needs in relatively large amounts for vital functions, and the enzymes that it's a cofactor for act to trigger certain functions in the body, like hormone production, regulation, muscle contraction, blood and bone formation, organ function, and so much more. In fact, I like to think of magnesium as the oil that keeps our engine running smoothly. Without it, everything starts to wear down and deteriorate in our body. Now, a key component in understanding magnesium's role in the body is realizing that it's one of the very first minerals that's utilized when the body is under any degree of stress. Have you ever felt like you were running on empty? What if the answer was as simple as a mineral that you've been overlooking? So let's dig into a few of the very specific roles that magnesium has in the body, from being a cofactor to all of these enzymatic reactions to being a mitigator of stress. Magnesium's most important function is the creation of energy in our bodies, as it's a cofactor for the production of ATP. Am I bringing you back to science class yet here? In fact, it's an essential cofactor for 6 of the 8 steps in the Krebs cycle, which breaks down glucose and turns it into energy, in short, and ATP production. Magnesium's essential for RNA and DNA production. It helps regulate the ion channels in and out of our cells, and therefore is the regulator of other key minerals in the body like sodium, potassium, and calcium. Without magnesium, these other minerals can't do the jobs that they need to do as well. And we all know how important electrolytes are for overall health and vitality. Magnesium is involved with nerve impulses and cell signaling, the ways our cells communicate with one another, with muscle function, from utilizing oxygen to balancing out electrolytes, and contributing to the contraction, relaxation, repair of tears, and the building of new muscle fibers. Magnesium, essential for the building blocks of life. I had one of my clients report back to me after starting to implement more magnesium into their routine. And they said, for the first time in years, I woke up feeling rested, like really rested. Another client said, I can't believe I slept through my alarm clock. I can't remember the last time I slept that well. Other clients have also noted improvements with muscular recovery after exercise, regulation of bowel movements, and even improvements with heart palpitations. And honestly, it's no surprise, knowing how this vital mineral supports every aspect of our life, that people are seeing these life-changing and life-giving changes just by implementing magnesium. The personal testaments are enough to convince me of magnesium's case, but I've also done a lot of research on the back end too. But also, my own personal experiences are extremely valid. In a world that's so inundated with stressors, toxins, and pharmaceuticals being handed out like candy, our bodies have become starved for the comfort and life giving powers of magnesium. I truly believe this. So, what's contributing to this rapid burn rate of magnesium in our bodies? I think there's a handful of factors at play since we know stress depletes magnesium stores and depletes other mineral stores. What are some of the major stressors that we're dealing with in today's modern day and age that are contributing to this depletion of minerals and this rapid magnesium burn rate? A few of the things that come to mind for me are consuming more processed foods than ever before, chronic stress, alcohol and drugs, pesticides, heavy metal exposure or poor detox function, fertilizers, fluoride, intestinal diseases like Crohn's or celiacs, refined grains, fortified foods, excessive sweating without proper replenishment of minerals, stress and trauma, and so much more. It's just crazy to think about how our environment, how the stressors we're exposing ourselves to, and all of these different things can impact our mineral status so much. So I want to dig real quick into a couple little deep dives on magnesium and its relationship to very specific levels in the body of other minerals and vitamins. So we're just going to look at two specific cases here. Like I said, magnesium is essential for 300 to 3,000 different enzymatic reactions within the body. So we're not going to dive into all 3,000 of those processes. We're just going to look at two here that I think are really valuable. And then you can continue to do your own research after you listen to this episode. I'll give you a handful of my favorite resources to learn more about magnesium, and we can go from there. So I first off want to talk about vitamin D status in the body and magnesium. So magnesium is essential for vitamin D synthesis and metabolism. Essentially, we're getting vitamin D from the sun or from some of our foods, and then it needs to go through this process in our body to be converted into a usable form. It needs to be synthesized and changed up a little bit to become active vitamin D in our body. Now, there's a handful of different steps that are involved with this process, but the three major enzymes determining active vitamin D levels in our body are dependent on magnesium. So without adequate magnesium, the body will struggle to convert vitamin D from our environment into the active and usable form in the liver, consequently leading to low vitamin D status. In this case, it's not necessarily a vitamin D supply issue. If someone's low in vitamin D, it's a magnesium supply issue. So it's important that we just take all these different little pieces of the puzzle and bring them together when we're looking at our mineral and vitamin status. So there are different ways you can look at the status. You can get some blood work done to look at your vitamin D status, and you can get an hair tissue mineral analysis done to look at your magnesium status. And then when we're looking at all of these different perspectives, we can kind of piece it together and draw conclusions and hypothesize what's actually going on in the bigger picture here. I will attach a valuable image into the show notes here that I really like to look at that shows the vitamin D synthesis process, and it shows each touch point that magnesium is essential for in that process. I'm just such a visual person, so I like looking at that, and it helps me better understand what's going on. So vitamin D and magnesium essential for each other to carry out the roles in the body. The next relationship I'd like to look at is the relationship of magnesium to calcium. Now, when I am analyzing hair tissue mineral analysis with my clients, we look at the different ratios of the minerals that show up in the hair, and we can deduct and hypothesize different things that are going on in the body by looking at those patterns. So in the case of calcium and magnesium, we call this the blood sugar ratio. It can help us gain valuable insight to how an individual is actually using glucose and synthesizing other nutrients like proteins and fats in the body to create energy. It can also give us insights to addiction patterns or how a family history of alcoholism might be affecting an individual. Magnesium helps calcium absorb into the bones. So if we are consuming a lot of calcium, whether it's through our diet or through supplementation, but we don't have adequate stores of magnesium coming in with that, then there's going to be an issue with calcium being absorbed into the bones. There might be issues such as osteoporosis that arise or bone spurs, things like that have to do with calcification in the body. When the calcium to magnesium ratio is off, the symptoms of calcifications in the body increase. And excessive calcium is pro-inflammatory, and therefore adequate amounts of magnesium in ratio to calcium can be anti-inflammatory, which is the goal. Now, I think it's important to note right here, I think this is a good spot to talk about getting our magnesium and calcium from foods. When we look at some of the foods that are rich in calcium, we think of, well, initially I think of dairy, I think of cheeses and dairy products. Those products are also very rich in magnesium. So it's like nature intended it to be this way. We're getting magnesium in with our calcium. So it's important to note that when we are supplementing any vitamin, mineral, or supplement in isolation, it is going to impact the ratio at which we are getting in other minerals and nutrients. So this is why I always recommend working with a qualified practitioner that can help you create a customized, individualized supplement plan that really looks at the greater picture, the holistic picture, how everything is connected to each other. So if we were supplementing calcium, we'd want to just really ensure that we're getting adequate, if not more than enough magnesium into the body. Now, I think the topic of calcium accumulating within the body is really interesting and fascinating. When we look at the addiction ratio, hair tissue mineral analysis, or the alcoholism ratio, also known as the blood sugar ratio, when we see that calcium to magnesium ratio inverted and we're seeing more calcium accumulating and not enough magnesium, that's when the body starts to create its own calcifications, whether that's bone spurs or calcifications in the tissues to some degree. I think it's really interesting to look at this because in my mind, it's like, okay, the magnesium has been depleted because the body has been under a significant amount of stress for a while, whether that's because someone's been addicted to alcohol for a while, or they have been struggling with addictions throughout their family history, or even maybe passed down a degree of addictive behaviors from the family. That's a lot of stress that's taking place in the body overall. And we know that stress causes a higher magnesium burn rate. The body's going to be burning through that magnesium at a quicker rate to be able to handle the stress better. And when we don't have enough magnesium, the calcium doesn't continue to be absorbed into the tissue or into the bones like it's supposed to be. So it starts depositing. And I think it's really fascinating because it's almost like the accumulation of calcium in the tissues is synonymous with an individual's tendency to harden or distance themselves from reality, to slow the body down. It's like one of those instances where it's like, okay, I'm not going to slow my life down. I'm going to keep doing these things that are stressful. I'm going to keep doing these things that are harmful to my body. But my body's like, no, you aren't. I'm going to start depositing that calcium. I'm going to start slowing your body down for you since you aren't going to do it for yourself. So it's really just incredible to look at how the body responds to different circumstances via accumulation of minerals or changing at a physiological level. So just a really interesting thing to look at. Now, when we look at the mineral makeup of the hair, we gain insight to the rest of the story, which I think is really incredible. We gain a longer term perspective of the effects of life on someone's metabolism. And we know that stress tends to majorly exacerbate the problems with magnesium deficiency because as stress rises and sodium rises, magnesium reserves tend to drop in the cells and tissues. And this mechanism behind stress's ability to increase that calcium to magnesium ratio and cause blood sugar and cardiovascular related problems is really important to understand in the vitamin and mineral world. In an ever so stressful and toxic world, our bodies are starving for magnesium. So I want to talk about a handful of symptoms that are typically associated with inadequate amounts of magnesium in the diet. And so this is just quick little list I'm going to run through here. There's so many other things that can be associated, and there's other things that can cause these symptoms as well. So just because you're experiencing one of these symptoms doesn't mean you have a magnesium deficiency, but it could be something to look into and actually get some functional lab testing done to take an individualized approach to your health and wellness. So symptoms of inadequate magnesium include low vitamin D status, brain fog, fatigue, hormone imbalances, poor recovery, poor sleep, imbalanced mineral stores, calcium accumulations, calcifications, osteoporosis, other depleted mineral stores, a low threshold or tolerance for stress, low energy overall, chronic fatigue, inflammation, constipation, migraines, high blood pressure and heart disease, inability to handle stress well, sensitivity to caffeine or alcohol. Anyone get the jitters out there? Might be something going on there. Abnormal heart rhythms, restless leg syndrome, irritability, poor nail and hair growth, low blood pressure, and more. So this list literally goes on and on. I think it's so crazy. So many different things related to magnesium deficiency in the body. A handful of the things that I hear often when I'm working with my clients is usually individuals that are super depleted in magnesium tend to have a lot of chocolate cravings, and that's because chocolate is actually rich in magnesium. So it makes sense intuitively and innately that our body would crave chocolate when we're low in magnesium, because there are some potent and rich minerals in high quality chocolate. So chocolate cravings is one of the biggest ones. Difficult falling asleep at night or waking up in the morning between 2 and 3 a.m. because that blood sugar is not being regulated, or waking up feeling groggy and just not feeling refreshed. Those are the main ones I see in my clinical practice. Additionally, there are certain populations that are more likely to need more magnesium than others. That includes individuals with Crohn's or celiac disease, because there's an inability to fully absorb all the nutrients from our food that we're consuming. Individuals that are under chronic stress, athletes, people who are sweating a lot, people with type 2 diabetes, those with a history of alcoholism, and the older population in general tend to need a lot more magnesium than others. Additionally, individuals with heavy menstrual cycles and those who drink a lot of coffee, tea, soda, and or alcohol, and those individuals with heavy metals. When there's an abundance of heavy metals in ratio to certain minerals, it can rapidly deplete those stores of minerals. So we want to make sure that we're looking at that often to ensure that those ratios are ideal. So what are the ideal daily intakes of magnesium for the average individual? According to the National Institute of Health, the recommended daily allowance for magnesium is 310 to 420 milligrams for adults. Now, to put that into perspective, as far as magnesium amounts go, in 1 glass of milk, there's approximately 27 milligrams of magnesium. In 1 chicken breast, 9 milligrams. In a half of an avocado, 29 milligrams. And in 1 ounce of dark chocolate, 64 milligrams of magnesium. And the recommended daily allowance is 310 to 420 milligrams for the average adult. So it seems like there's a little bit of a gap between what we are likely consuming in our diet and the amount of magnesium that we are actually getting in each day. If our real goal is to get up to 310 or so, around there, that's quite a bit of magnesium that we should be aiming for. So where can we find magnesium in our diet? So we can find it in a variety of different foods. Some of the highest amounts of magnesium are in foods like organ meats, like beef liver, also known as nature's multivitamin. We can find it in a lot of legumes, nuts, seeds. My favorite are the sprouted pumpkin seeds from Costco. Anyone else out there? Plus, you're getting some good sea salt in with it as well. Lots of dark leafy green vegetables like spinach, collard greens, things like that are rich in magnesium. Dark chocolate, dairy products, avocado, sprouted oats, and then some of my favorite nutrient-rich foods like blackstrap molasses, which you're obviously going to just be using in small amounts, and nutritional yeast. Love some of that sprinkled on my popcorn. A couple other things I like to look at when we're looking at where we're getting magnesium is I like to look at an individual's water that's being consumed. So some sources of water actually have a decent amount of magnesium in them. Other sources don't. So it depends if you're on spring water, well water, city water, whatever's going on. I always recommend looking up the EWG tap water database. You can enter in your zip code online and you can see all of the different things that's in your city water, from contaminants to other things like that. So EWG tap water database, I'll put that in the show notes as well. It's obviously not applicable if you are on your own water, if you're on well water or a spring fed water system. So it's important to look at that. Some water is actually higher in calcium content than magnesium content too. So if that's the case, it could be valuable to look at that. If you're looking at your functional lab testing results and you're realizing, hey, it looks like I'm getting a lot more calcium in compared to magnesium and my ratio is looking a little bit off, it might be valuable to look at a water source that's more rich in magnesium or figure out how to get that calcium content down in the water as well. So just a few different perspectives to look at when it comes to magnesium status and what's coming in through the diet and through hydration. So one of the other ways we can get magnesium into our daily routine is through magnesium supplements. And it's important to note that not all supplements are created equal. If we are talking about supplemental forms of magnesium that we would get from the local drugstore, there are a handful of different kinds out there. If you're going to your local CVS, Walgreens, you're likely going to come across magnesium citrate as one of the most common ones. And that's typically just the go-to form of magnesium that's in a capsule form. This type of magnesium is not tolerated well by many. And I think that's why magnesium might get a bad rap sometimes, because this type of magnesium can cause a lot of stomach issues. The absorption rate for our body is not great with magnesium citrate. So that's probably one of the most common ones out there, but I honestly do not use it myself. And I don't usually recommend it for my clients either, because there's just a lot of other options that are more easily absorbed and better utilized by our body. So another common form of magnesium out there is magnesium chloride. You'll usually see these in magnesium chloride flakes. They're primarily used for foot soaks and bath soaks and topical skin applications. Sometimes the magnesium chloride flakes are dissolved into like a lotion or an oil. And the main functions of magnesium chloride are to help support detoxification in the body, aid in metabolic support and kidney function. And that can be absorbed topically through the skin. That's one of my favorites. I love to absorb through foot soaks or through lotions. It's just really easy to implement into my routine and not forget about it. Okay, magnesium glycinate. There's also magnesium bisglycinate. There's a handful of these. I'm just talking about some of the top ones I see out there. Magnesium glycinate can be found in some supplements. The absorption rate tends to be a lot better with mag glycinate versus other forms. So the main functions of magnesium glycinate are to support relaxation, help with leaky gut, mitigate nerve pain, and support the system overall. And many people tend to tolerate this form of magnesium better than others. Another form is magnesium malate. This is magnesium salt form of malic acid, and it's a more energizing form of magnesium. It can be valuable for muscle pain and fibromyalgia. And then there's magnesium oxide, also known as magnesia. It can be good in small doses, often used as an antacid for indigestion and heartburn. So very specific application for magnesium oxide. Oh, and there is one more I did want to talk about too, magnesium sulfate. So also known as Epsom salts. These are taken in small doses to help with constipation if you're taking them orally. And they tend to have more of a laxative effect. They may cause the stomach to be upset, but Epsom salts, as you probably know, can also be absorbed via skin through a bath or foot soak. So that's a valuable way to do it. And typically when you're absorbing magnesium sulfate through the skin, you aren't going to have those stomach issues as if you were taking them orally. There are many other forms of magnesium out there, but these are the most common ones I come across and get asked about. We can see the wide range of effects just by digging into these few that magnesium has on the body. So we can also see why it might be valuable to consider an individual's circumstances and what they've been going through, the experiences prior to supplementing just any form of magnesium. Okay, so now that we've talked about these different sources of magnesium, how we can absorb it, let's talk about what happens when we consume too much magnesium. So in healthy individuals, the kidneys do a great job of sending any excess magnesium that's consumed through the urine to be excreted. Diarrhea, nausea, and abdominal cramps are symptoms of intolerance in either too much or the improper form of magnesium. So if someone's experiencing those symptoms, it's probably a good idea to stop consuming that type of magnesium. Another important thing to note is that certain things can impact our body's ability to properly absorb and utilize magnesium. If someone's consuming large amounts of synthetic vitamin D or zinc, it's important to ensure that adequate amounts of magnesium are coming in. And if you don't know if you are, it'd be valuable to get functional lab testing done, like the hair tissue mineral analysis and some blood work to show these specific levels. So you can know if your mineral to vitamin ratios are dialed in, if you're getting those optimal absorption ratios, or maybe one thing over here is causing a little bit of a depletion over here. Because every mineral works hand in hand with the others. And when we focus too much on just one mineral, we can end up skewing or throwing off our other mineral stores. Now, if you are feeling like any of this information is resonating with you, some of the next steps I might suggest would be get an HTMA report done, a hair tissue mineral analysis. In fact, I am the owner of Hair and Holistics, a holistic health practice where I do wellness consulting with individuals. So we look at a few specific functional lab tests, from the GI map to the hair tissue mineral analysis to some blood work. And we are able to look at specific vitamin and mineral status in the body and compare those patterns with other common patterns for wellness. And we're able to individualize your approach to consuming minerals, whether that's through diet or supplementation, however you want. But the HTMA really just serves as a roadmap for your mineral composition, so you know exactly what steps you need to take to move forward to achieve your wellness goals. You're not just out there guessing, throwing in a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and wasting time, energy, and money down the way, which I have certainly done before. Highly recommend that. I'll put links in the show notes for all of these resources and how you can work with me one-on-one for that. You can work with a qualified practitioner or run any new shifts by your current medical provider to ensure that these shifts would be appropriate for you. Ask your doctor about magnesium intake. A lot of practitioners out there are very open to the wonders of magnesium, and they're starting to understand and realize that this mineral is essential for all of these vital foundational components of health, and that when we can add that in different ways, that we can truly support our wellness and take our health to the next level. The holistic ascent, am I right? So, want to dive deeper into anything in the magnesium world, one of my recommendations would be this book right here, holding it up, The Magnesium Miracle by Dr. Carolyn Dean. This is like a wealth of knowledge. If you thought this podcast episode was interesting, just barely scraping the surface on what magnesium can do in the body, this is going to be like your holy grail for magnesium. Like, there's so many research articles in here and so many practical applications, and you can literally spend days looking through all of the different ways that magnesium can impact your health and ways that we can source different magnesiums. That's The Magnesium Miracle by Dr. Carolyn Dean. Super helpful. You can also find more information on mineral status at my website, www.heronholistics.com, HAREN holistics, HOLISTICS.com, and in my online wellness community and app, Mountain Gal Wellco. I will link all of these in the show notes for you all, along with some of the resources and articles that I referred to throughout this chat. And I hope this served you well. So if you have been loving the magnesium you've been consuming, let me know. I'd love to know what's been working for you, what hasn't been. If you have a favorite type of magnesium, I'll share my favorites down below. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, but I'll see you on the next episode of The Holistic Ascent. Thanks all.